Alright, welcome good friends, fans, lovers, countrymen, DOA, players, united.
Ooh, down them stairs.
Ooh, ouch. We are now into hour number 2 of our Monday DOA stream, Burning Point. This is the DOA Talk section, in which we just kind of have a free-form, kind of open discussion about different aspects of the larger community, the fighting game scene, video games, etc., right? And, one of the things that Johnny and I really wanted to talk about this time, specifically, is kind of tournaments, community interaction, and stuff like that from the tournament organizer side. As you may or may not know, we just finished Cali Crush 2015, which yay, was the culmination of a lot of really hard work and a lot of fun from myself, Johnny, and Max, our esteemed colleague in the process. And some things went really, really well. Some things didn't go exactly up to our expectations. But I think there's something to be said, or something of value about kind of sharing the experience from our side of the world on these things. Because especially in that kind of last month leading up to it, I had some interactions with some players from different games and different communities and whatnot, which seemed to indicate that they're kind of unaware of what goes into the process of making a tournament. And since we're all like, we all really care about this community, whether it's just the DOA community or the larger FGC. Like, we all care about it, and we all want to be able to have really amazing events and do fun things and have everyone have an amazing time and have a ton of money up for grabs and prizes and gifts and whatnot. And there's just kind of, like, it takes certain things from all aspects of the community, right? There's certain things that have to come from the organizers, there's certain things that have to come from the game publishers, developers, etc. And there's certain things that have to come from the players as well, at all kinds of different stages for things to all come together for good events that kind of elevate us all. Johnny, do you have anything to add as far as this introduction and all that?
No, I think you're right. I think talking about what goes into really putting together an event like that is a much bigger task than I think either one of us really thought when we first started out on this. And I think people appreciate sort of all points of view with that kind of stuff.
Yeah. So there's actually in the chat, Shin Maruku says he wants to clarify that he thinks that there is more of a conglomerate than a community because there's not a lot of crossplay.
Yeah,
and
I saw that.
I want to challenge that concept a little bit first, because I do think that that's kind of dependent upon where you are in the community. I think that perhaps between like all the Air Dasher games, there's a lot of crossplay. Between say Street Fighter and Mortal Kombat, there's some crossplay, and Marvel has crossplay with a lot of the Air Dashers and a lot of things. I would say if the 3D games were more prevalent, like they were in the past, there's crossplay between that. And but specifically, this whole concept of conglomerate versus community, right? Whether it's like the America thing, is it a melting pot or a salad bowl? Like, that's actually part of what we want to address, because I think there's some degree to which he's completely right, and that like there is basically, it's like, what is that in the background?
Sorry, that's me. Sorry, I need to fix something really quick in my apartment, so.
Okay.
Ignore that.
Go mute.
So, yeah, right?
Yeah, I didn't realize I was going to pick on mic.
So yeah, there's something to be said about the fact that there is indeed, like, not to use a totally loaded term, but some segregation between communities. And one of our goals as tournament organizers, and not just us, as all the different TOs, right, is to really promote much more crossplay. And oh my gosh, why is this such a bad connection right now?
Okay. Well, I kind of take a different approach to it in that, I mean, I can never speak for everybody, but I enjoy playing so many different fighting games that I look at it more as a community in that, you know, because I enjoy playing Dead or Alive, I enjoy playing Smash Brothers, I enjoy playing Street Fighter.
Yeah, right.
I want to provide, as an organizer, a place where, you know, everybody can feel like they can have a place to come to and play.
Yes.
Obviously, there's a lot of challenges with that, and I know, you know, you can look back at our track record as TOs, and just recently with Cali Crush this year, we added Smash Brothers to the roster. You know, it becomes sort of a different thing. It's easy for me to say, you know, I would love to support every game out there, but it's quite a challenge.
Running away, Hajin.
To organize all those moving pieces. And we try the best we can to try to keep in touch with all these different, like, I get, you know, communities, smaller, separated communities of the games. But when I think about the FGC, I think about, you know, excitement level in watching. You know what? If I'm gonna break it down to one thing, I'm gonna break it down to that moment at Evo where everybody in the room that we were with was laser focused on what GamerB was doing in Street Fighter. And I don't mean like it has to be Street Fighter, I mean that like
Could be whatever,
people, are all together and they're all really attentive and excited and hyped about what's going on screen. I go back to, you know, SCR when we were playing our finals, our top 8, and Marvel was going on right next door, and there were a bunch of Marvel guys just like getting really hyped and excited about what was going on over on our screen. So
yeah, it was amazing.
Play is there because I think that everybody really, I think fundamentally these fighting games are very similar. You know what I mean? I'm not going to get into the nitty gritty of how they're different. I think what's more important is like how, you know, the reasons why we enjoy playing these games fundamentally exists in all the games that are available. And that's the kind of environment that I want to be a part of.
Yeah, I think, okay, so that's actually an amazing point, and kind of segues into a little bit of what I wanted to talk about as far as adding new games. Because one of the things that we were really bummed to have to do was cancel Virtua Fighter. And I got a variety of responses about that. You know, we had some people who were totally, you know, like, bummed. They're like, man, that sucks. I really appreciate your effort. Thank you. And we had some people who literally just, like, lashed out at us. And they were kind of like, you know, names are completely irrelevant, but we just had some people who were just pissed. And they're like, how dare you? I mean, I don't know what makes you think you're this, you know, like, you know, screw you guys, Canada Cup's better, or whatever, and, like, all these different things. Or, like, you know, how come DOA got a pot bonus but we didn't? Or how come this, you know...
Right.
You know, stuff like that. And it was just this weird thing where I just don't think that people realized... you know, these people realize the state of their community and how hard it is on our end. Because basically, as a tournament organizer, we have two options. Pay for every single thing out of our pockets, which then, like, if we're paying for things out of our pockets and people are being... Why are you doing that?
Sorry.
If we're paying for things out of our pockets and then players are being really, what's it called? Like, entitled. There was a sense of entitlement, like, oh, well, how come we don't get this? We should just get this because, right? Like, it's tough when we hear that and we're like, well, look, either you're just saying you desire, you know, like, you think you just deserve access to our personal bank accounts just because you are who you are, or you're saying that you should get this access from, you know, our sponsors and from the developer. Like, you know, we reached out to Sega, and Sega, you know, unfortunately Sega's dealing with their own things, and so, like, Sega of America really doesn't exist anymore outside of Sonic the Hedgehog. And so that made it difficult, whereas, like, we have a relationship with Team Ninja, for example, who's pushed really hard for DOA, and so we were able to get things from them and get support from them and stuff like that that really helped push the game. But, like, when it comes to even outside of the developer, one of the things that we have to really work on when we go toward any potential sponsor, whether it's a sponsor for giveaways or is a sponsor for, you know, people who are trying to like pay for advertising space or whatever, or put down on pop bonuses, is their first question, their number one question is always like, what are your numbers? How many people do you expect to show up, and how many people do you expect to watch?
Yeah.
And this was the difficulty with the Virtua Fighter crew, because when we originally did the whole thing where we in March we did a big poll of like, what games would you like us to add? Virtua Fighter by far had the most support, and it was really good. We were excited. Like, we're big Virtua Fighter fans, and we love the game. Obviously, DOA has this really intimate connection to Virtua Fighter, and even like Sega and Tecmo, or Koei Tecmo, Team Ninja are really there's a relationship there and a mutual respect. But like with Sega of America not being able to provide anything to us because they're just like not operating in that space anymore, we have to go to exterior third-party sponsors to try to do it. And when we're in the beginning saying like, oh yeah, we had like 55, 60 people here that are really pumped up and ready to play, and then, you know, 2 weeks from the tournament they're like, oh, how many people do you have pre-registered? And we're saying, you know, like much lower numbers. Then these same people who were excited to, you know, kind of promote and provide something for that game are now like, you know what, we just think it's financially not for us. And so that's one of the aspects of being a tournament organizer that's really difficult, in the sense that we're kind of the middlemen between the community and the sponsors. So as much as we really wanted to do Virtua Fighter, it just came to this point where like the sponsors weren't in because we didn't have the numbers. But then at the same time, we're trying to tell the community, like, you know, the community is wondering why we're not getting sponsorship and pop bonuses, and so they don't want to come. You know, it's like really, it was this kind of like damned if you do, damned if you don't, because, you know, players didn't want to come out and waste their time if there wasn't a bunch of money on the line, but sponsors didn't want to put up money if there weren't a bunch of players that they knew were going to be there.
Right. You're right. And to compound on that is the idea that, you know, we want to ensure that we have a place for people to fight. Like I said, we really wanted a place for Virtua Fighter to play.
Yeah.
And it was unfortunate that the numbers weren't there, but, you know, if the numbers were there, even without a pop bonus, the winners would have still walked away with a tidy, you know, a good-sized amount of money if there was enough people there to play it.
Yeah.
And that's another part of the facets. Like, you know, as much as we want to provide a place for everybody to play, a lot of the things that we do and we try to do in reaching out for people to come is we also kind of hope that that word gets spread among the players and they invite more people along. You know what I mean? Like, it's kind of like it's a handshake between us and the community. It can't be, you know, something where because of everything that we do is the only facet as to why you should come. We do our very best to provide that environment and that place to play. And it's also to say that a bit of that afterwards is kind of on the community to also be a part of that.
Yeah. So I want to address this question from Last Shinobi about tournament rules.
Sure.
Tournament rules are universal. They're generally agreed upon by whatever the gaming community is. Sometimes they have been laid in place by the developer publisher, but most of the time it kind of has stemmed from, you know, what the community thinks is the case. And when you want to run a tournament, it's generally pretty easy to find. You could go to whatever forum for that game, and usually in tournaments the first thing in there is like, you know, tournament standardized rules. You know, like for DOA, it originally was like 2 out of 3 for most rounds or for most matches, and then it was 3 out of 5 for winners, losers, and grand finals. 60-second clock, best 3 out of 5 for the match, you know, things like that. You know, no dojo is one thing, and so that's something that you like adhere to because this is what you want to do. We actually, when we went to Evo, Big E ran a tournament where it was just all 3 out of 5, and we loved that because we think
Yeah.
And
great.
DOA, it works a little better. Not that 2 out of 3 is bad, but just that everybody loves 3 out of 5. And it's more time for people to make adjustments and changes, and we really like that. So we ran our whole tournament 3 out of 5.
Yeah, keep it consistent with that number.
Yeah.
And you know what? That's something that evolves that you learn as you play. I looking at the way the Smash guys were playing, it seemed to me that it's possible that they might want to consider lowering some of their life counts. I mean, we would have to talk. If we wanted to make that change, it's not like we would, just make it be like, oh, Kyo says that's how it goes.
Yeah.
In a way, it is, but we would definitely address the fighters to make sure that they understand where we're coming from on that thought process.
Yeah.
And if it fits their play style and their adjustment level and things like that.
It's interesting because it really is. It's kind of like a symbiotic relationship. And we're in the middle of both sides, but bottom line is we have to, like, as a TO, if you make changes completely without consulting the community, you kind of lose respect, right? Like, it's important for us to maintain the respect and maintain a presence in the community, and if there's anything that we could have done better, absolutely, with these other 2 games, with Smash and with Virtua Fighter, it was to have a larger community presence. I mean, we kind of went into this year knowing that we're a DOA tournament and we wanted to expand, and so we kind of looked to proxies to help us out, people who we already knew that were big in their communities, to kind of be our voice in that end. Now, part of that's resources and time, but part of that was just kind of an intentional strategy. Like, we thought if it was coming from somebody who was already huge in the community, that it would help. And I think there's, like, from our end, we missed an opportunity to do kind of like a twofold attack, where we had that person talking for us, and at the same time, like, we were super physically present at all these things. Like, we spent a lot of our time in tournament planning and, courting the different sponsors and stuff like that, and we spent less time courting the players that we thought we should have, especially in retrospect. So for next year, we have a lot of plans for what we're going to do for next year. That's going to be a lot of fun. But it is important to know that, like, we did a lot. And we very graciously, from D-Link and from Elgato and from Loot Crate and everybody who kind of, Team Ninja, everyone who supported us, we actually had a ton of things. We had trophies for top 3 in all games. We had giveaways. We had Elgatos for the winners. We had Loot Crates we were giving away on stream. We had the belt, obviously, for DOA. The pot even for Smash was not too bad. I mean, these kids who came in and played, paid $15 to run a tournament. First place walked out with something like $170 or whatever. So it ended up being a really good tournament, and we worked really hard to get our venue, to be at a place that's kind of a place of prestige, a place that's like in Los Angeles and not too far away, so people didn't have to travel very far and whatnot. So there were a lot of things that I think we did okay, and then some things that, as every year, we're gonna try to improve on X, Y, and Z, as much as we can. What else, Johnny? Let's talk about. I don't know. Do we want to talk about tech? Do we want to talk about outreach? I mean, there are just so many avenues that we could kind of go into.
Yeah. What do you mean by outreach? I took a round from Hajin that was a great, by the way. I just want to point that out.
Actually, let's address this. We have a question. Has the from Shinmurku, has the DOA scene looked into what Counter-Strike did to rise to prominence? I think they have the best recipe used to catapult DOA to a good point. I think you're really right.
Strategy is.
Well, the thing is, like, the thing that's the difference between Counter-Strike and League of Legends and even Street Fighter are that the numbers for them are just astronomically bigger than they are for DOA. And there are a lot of things that go into that. Some of the difficulties with DOA not being taken seriously. Some of it's just it being a 3D game in a 2D space, Whereas the, like first-person shooters, the MMORPGs, like they kind of all exist in their own different spaces and obviously have massive, massive, massive followings. So for DOA, it's almost an apples to oranges comparison because they're just, it's a lot harder to talk about. Let me put it this way: if you have an event where there are 30,000 people in Southern California that play your game, you can count on like 10% of those people, right? 3,000 people showing up to an event if you do an event, because you have maybe 10% of your people hardcore. Even if you have 5%, and you're talking about 1,500 people show up.
Hajin, if you 2P me again, I will come to your house and I will beat the shit out of you. Just letting you know that.
He just did it.
There it is. But yeah, so if you have numbers that are that massive, like the level of input that you have to do to get not marketable, but like profitable returns, and I don't mean just profitable by money, but profitable returns as far as like it being good for the community, yeah, it having big interest, it being something that has like a big broadcast presence, etc. The effort you have to put in comparison to the returns you're gonna get are not, the gap is not that massive. Versus a game like DOA, DOA might only have 300 people in Southern California that play it at any type of level where they're gonna participate in a tournament, right? So if you're talking about 300 people versus 30,000 people, then you're talking about, if you get 10% engagement rate, that's only 30 people. And it's really hard to run a tournament off of 30 people. So when you have a smaller, larger pool to begin with, you have to try to work really hard to get a higher proportional rate of engagement in order to make these things be something that can really elevate the whole community and have kind of a bigger imprint on the larger FGC or gaming landscape in general. And that's part of what's just so tough. Yeah.
I would also like to point out just really quickly, and I think the Counter-Strike idea is interesting, but you were kind of right when you said they're apples to oranges too. When you're talking about fighting games, in a lot of cases you're talking about, well, in every case really, you're talking about two opponents, 1 versus 1. When you're talking about Counter-Strike or League of Legends, you're talking about teams. So you're already increasing the number of people that are playing per quote-unquote match per capita, right?
Yeah, that's a really big point. That's a really good point.
That's a part of it. So I mean, I'm interested because you said, that's what Counter-Strike's to do, and please let me know in the chat, like, what is it that you think they did specifically? Because I would like to address that.
The other thing too is that Counter-Strike's been around for a long time. Like I remember.
I don't know if it's been around as long as DOA.
Well, in a competitive sense, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I remember. So let me put it this way: I remember, because part of the thing is that things like Counter-Strike, League of Legends, World of Warcraft, those games were always home console games. So when you got gatherings together, what you would do is you would lend yourself, or it lends itself to different types of gatherings, because everybody would come together and they would all bring their own computers and things like that to do a LAN party and stuff like that, right? Whereas the way fighting games come up is they existed at the arcade. It was this really decentralized thing that required less organization from the community and more like you could just show up and a bunch of random people just happen to be there on Friday night because it's Friday night and it's after school and you could do whatever, right? Whereas like if you wanted to get a LAN party together for, say, Counter-Strike, you had to get all your friends together and say like, hey, all bring your computers to my house, we're going to tie them together, daisy chain them together, and then we'll all play. And it was super fun. Like I remember doing that when I was in high school, back in the year 2000, doing things like that. But that's just something that is not, it from the beginning kind of set the stage for a different type of community. Not a better or worse necessarily, but just a slightly different, a different path for the communities. So when it came time to organizing fighting game tournaments and stuff like that, you know, it's not everybody who's already engaged, who's already spent a lot of money on the equipment and whatnot. Like, we've all have our consoles, but I mean, for the longest time, the difference between playing Marvel 2 at the arcade and playing it at home on your controller was just like night and day. It just really was. So what else? So one of the things that we would like to do, first of all, I think I saw somebody say we did a great job with Cali Crush / Shinobi. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. We appreciate that.
Can I add to that
Uh-huh.
while you're on it?
Yeah.
I love, you know that John?
What?
I
No,
love
no.
that you guys. Oh, I thought you said no. I was like, you know what? I'm gonna come over there. I love that you guys at Loot Crate involved. Like, they're so great over there because they're my sponsor. So when I saw that you guys had Loot Crates and stuff, and Loot Crate was a part of it, I like fangirled. I was like, oh my god! You guys never told me that you were like contacting. I got super excited, and I know because I was there for the thing, like the whole thing on the stream, that everyone was. What I really enjoyed was that everyone was really positive.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Compared to a lot of other streams in the past where DOA has been involved with competitors, I found that the general vibe and mood of everyone was just very positive, very welcoming, and very warming. And they were really impressed with what you guys had done for the tournament. Like, they were, like, Destruction Bomb, I remember saying a couple of times, like, the fact that they're giving out prizes and the fact that they're doing all this stuff is so cool. Like, he kept mentioning how awesome it was that you guys were doing that. And I know that, you know, I know people were totally excited and not expecting that at all.
Right.
So.
Well, that's good. I mean, that's something that's something that's important to us because, you know, as much as we enjoy putting on the tournaments for the players that are there, we also acknowledge and it's very clear to us that it's also a production, and just like any other, you know, if you were operating a TV show or you're trying to do a movie, like, it really matters how your audience participates with your product. And so as far as we're concerned, giveaways and things like that we're always part of the plan. It was just as soon as we had the means to do so, we did. And luckily, you know, Loot Crate, D-Link, and Elgato really came through for us on that regard, and to be able to do that, I mean, that's amazing. And it was something. And Team Ninja, you know, they hooked us up with DLC codes and like gave away game.
That I don't
and
even have, by the way.
yeah, right. Like,
oh my god, that's another great up 100 Shinobi.
I mean, I remember when we got the codes from Tom. Big shout out to Tom Lee, who's just been phenomenal. When we got the codes from Tom, I was just like, you know what? I really want to take this Steam code because having it on PC, especially with you know, if you're trying to do DOA tournaments, one of the things that can be really useful is utilizing screenshots in the game. And the PC version is excellent for getting screenshots.
You better save that match.
Because it's not going to happen again.
Mine and Hajin's ratio is like 150 to 1, so like I save every like little thing I get.
I'm so sorry, Evan. Please continue.
It's okay. No, so that's kind of the thing, and so one of the things we're trying to do is, you know, like, we do want to. We got really lucky in the sense that we have pretty awesome players that showed up and can be consistent. You know, like our guys, Panda, Blaze, Mysticali, Switching Cupid, Nee, Roger. Who else was there? All these people. Vincent Rain, Josh, Manila Sunrise, Coffee Dad, The Apprentice. All these guys, and I hope I didn't leave anybody out.
Elliot.
Yeah, right?
Big shout out to Apprentice.
Yeah.
That's what I'm talking about. That's what I'm talking about. Like, The Apprentice showed up in a legit full Elliot costume. Like, that's the type of engagement we want. That's the type of engagement we're looking for. And honestly, when we're running a tournament, that we're hoping to foster, right? Because it's just so important for us. And, like, you know, we're going to be making changes to our tournament format for next year and things like that, because it's like, it's important to encourage that type of behavior, you know. And we always want it to be a place where, no matter what games we have involved, that every game feels safe and happy in their presence, and like it's a celebration. I don't know how that worked, but that looks strange.
She faked it. She held it. That's why.
But you know what I'm saying? Like when we've
absolutely.
One of the things that started the tournament in the first place was that DOA and other majors, there's a degree to which people kind of look their noses down, and I don't think it's super intentional. I think there are a lot of things that kind of go into that and can be involved. But for the most part, like, DOA gets a corner, and we're just kind of there. And from our experience in meeting this community and hanging out with everybody, they're really awesome people. They just are awesome people. So we're like, you know what, screw it. Like, we need a tournament where we're the main event, and we get to, like, all be there and be proud and show love and everything for our game.
Yeah, yes. No, that's exactly why we got into this whole thing. You know, it's not. I don't want anybody to think that we tried to set out to do something to bemoan the community when, you know, really it goes back to, like, we wanted to create something that we wanted to be able to go to.
Basically,
you know, when we go to all these other tournaments, you're right. It's all about, you know, getting kind of isolated in the corner, and that's starting to bum us out too much. So, you know, that's why we wanted to create something that was for, you know, a game that we really enjoyed.
Yeah. So this is actually a really interesting point. Shin Maruku again, he's being really awesome and active in the chat. He said the fact that people look down on their noses is why you should not try to appeal to them and grab outsiders.
Sorry.
So it's really. Ooh, do you want to get muted? No. So it's really actually important because I think I actually have this theory when it comes to DOA, but I think this is a cross-game theory, just in general. I think there are actually a lot of closet DOA fans that play other games. I think people are more interested in a wider variety of games than they know, and there are a few things keeping them from it, right? One is just the concept of, like, I'm not as good at that game as I am at this game, so I want to put my eggs in this basket where I'm good. The other aspect is really that we all know there's a hierarchy when you go to these tournaments, and it's tough because it's not really the fault of any particular game or community or anything. Like, a lot of these things, it's kind of like the way Apple and Microsoft became so big is really because they were the first ones to the game, right? So everyone else has to play catch up to them, stuff like that, right? There's a lot of, if you read Malcolm Gladwell's book Outliers, there's a lot of talk about that, where in any particular industry, kind of the first one to get a severe foothold in the game just always has control. And DOA, while being around for a long time, kind of relates to the tournament scene in respect and in this aspect, especially compared to something like Street Fighter, which is an incredible game, but, like, you know, is 20 years deep in tournaments, basically. And so it's actually really important to us as TOs to reach out to completely different communities as well as recruit newcomers. And I think that's actually something that should be really important to anyone that's playing as well, to all the players and all the people who go to the tournaments. Because, like, two things. One, doing this reach out and explaining game mechanics and just being cool with other people in other games is something that can help change the image of DOA on the larger scene from being just kind of lower on the totem pole to working its way up. And this is with any game, you know, like we are not the only game that is below Street Fighter, obviously, right?
Yeah.
But the second thing is that as it currently stands, there's honestly just not enough numbers. And numbers are a really, really, really big deal. And, you know, in the same way that you're, you know, like, say you're say you want to vote for somebody for president or whatever, right? Like, you could just do nothing and vote, which is what I would say is, you know, just showing up to a tournament and doing, you know, just playing your matches. Or you could campaign on their behalf. And I think there's something to be said about campaigning on behalf of your game, because if we all as a community do that, if we're all constantly reaching out and we're being really inclusive to new players who are curious, and you know, we do training sessions or whatever, right? We help people learn about the game, and we invite them out with us and whatnot. That's how we get our numbers up. Even if we hit, you know, if we think about it as a batting average or a 3-point percentage, and we're hitting on 30% of the people we talk to, that's how we get our numbers up, which then in return, you know, allows tournaments to get more sponsors. It allows the developer to have more money to make more versions of the game and to put more money into tournaments and so on and so forth. I mean, it would be beautiful to be able to say, you know, we could pull 300-400 people at tournaments, but we just can't. Like, we're just not there yet. But we shall be at some point if.
Well,
but
I would like to point out too, in a much bigger sense, tournaments for any game, any fighting game, is a bigger investment than return on the overall business strategy of a publisher.
Absolutely.
Even in the sense of, you know, like Capcom. You know, I know you would think that like doing tournaments is such a major part of their business model. It's kind of a cash sink. It's not a huge profit return for what they do. It's them spending money because of what they want to provide for their competitive players, for the people that play the game beyond playing the game.
Exactly.
You know, you'll see that in the way that like how Street Fighter 4 was a much bigger success in the last maybe 10 to 15 years than any other game, because it catered to that casual audience of people who like playing Street Fighter 2, and that's why their marketing was about that. That's why their big investment was about that. The core competitive fighting game scene is kind of a labor of love for any publisher.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So it's weird because one of the things that we ran face to face to with this tournament specifically was the concept, you know, like I talked a little bit about it, the entitlement of some players, and this is by no means a referendum on the entire Virtua Fighter community. If anything, the large majority of the Virtua Fighter community was very, very, very supportive and very good.
Absolutely.
You know, this is just some players, right? But like in any major conversation, the loudest voices can often control the dynamic of the conversation. And I will say that when we're dealing with these type of players, and when we're dealing with this concept of entitlement just in general, I think players need to understand that essentially, and Johnny, you could clarify this, but I tend to liken tournament funding from producers and definitely from third-party people, right? Like, you gotta realize that this is kind of like coming out of their marketing budget, right? At the end of the day, everybody is constantly thinking, you know, no matter whether it's, you know, Mad Catz or it's Capcom or, you know, Team Ninja or whoever, right? Like, they're constantly thinking, what is the return I'm gonna get for spending money on this promotion of the game, right? It's like there's like the music industry used to change, right? In previous life, the music industry was that you would do concerts as a way to promote your album, whether you were, you know, whatever, you know, the Rolling Stones or whatever, right? They would go on tour to promote their album because the album sales, when they were selling millions and millions and millions, were the big deal. And things change, where now basically the album is to promote their concerts, because the concerts make more money, and everybody downloads and steals the albums, and pays $10 for it on iTunes versus $25 at Tower Records and etc.
Right.
But the bottom line between that transition is, either way, they had to adjust where their money went and where they were able to charge the most money in order from their fans or whatever, in order to make their career the most financially viable. And at the end of the day, even though the creation of these games, specifically the fighting games and the promotion of them in tournaments, are labor of love, the people who are the actual developers are also answering to corporate. The corporate cares about money. Corporate cares about money.
Okay, yeah. Their business, they made an investment in a thing, and they want to see at least make or break that.
Exactly.
But I don't know. This is kind of getting a little off topic, but essentially it's to say, I can't say specifically that I know what Capcom's strategy is marketing-wise for Street Fighter V.
For sure.
And I can't say, from my experience, effectively, I would imagine that their marketing budget is different than their FGC budget. Mostly because of how they've been structuring the Capcom Cup and all that.
Absolutely. No, I'm not saying they are literally the same line item in their budget, but I'm saying that there's a similar regard in that sense, and I think it's important.
Yeah. Yes and no. Effectively, though, it's more like, whereas the marketing budget is want to sell as many units as possible, or hit a goal of units by a fiscal. Sell as many units as possible, or hit a goal of units by a fiscal budget return, right? By the end of the fiscal year, so the Capcom could say Street Fighter V was a financial success or a financial failure, or whatever it is, right?
Yes.
So you spend, X amount of marketing dollars to ensure that enough people buy the game. The fighting game community stuff, there's no particular return on that same sort of investment. You're not anticipating that the hardcore players are going to buy more copies of the game because you already know that they bought the copies of the game. What you're doing is community outreach. And the idea of that is to keep the conversation cyclical on the game, right? So when you set up a... But this is from a publisher's perspective, not our perspective, right?
Well, this is part of what I'm saying, though. Even in the community outreach sense, right? Keeping conversation on the game are things that... while they're not direct marketing, they still operate as indirect marketing, right? If people are continuing to talk about the game, that contributes to people being willing to buy DLC. That contributes to people, new people who are hearing about some stuff and getting introduced to the FGC, starting to buy the game and invest more money and things like that. It contributes to them being able to run it as the Capcom Cup versus just another game at a variety of tournaments, which helps them have control over the presentation of their product and things like that. So while, like I said, it's not necessarily that they're putting it on a, red-black budget and saying okay, well, we're going to put X amount of money into the FGC hoping we get X amount of money back and it better be in the black. It's like you said, it's generating...
It's kind of like...
Marketing has always been nebulous, though, haven't they?
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, basically the best way to explain it works like event budgets. You rarely can imagine a situation where, say, at Comic-Con, Lionsgate or whoever, Marvel, spends a shitload of money to build a big-ass booth. They don't get any money back from that booth, from that activity. It's kind of just to spend the money to have, you're right, the presence of mind to keep that conversation alive, right? About
I would argue.
So it's
I would argue.
Right? You end up
Hold up.
You're getting reporters to
Right?
Yeah, I would argue that it's
Exactly.
it's still publicity though. It's still marketing.
That's what
It's
I
just
said,
marketing
though.
in a
It
different
is.
way.
Yeah, for sure. But what I'm telling you is, in a Japanese company, the marketing dollars that are allocated to the selling of the game is different than that other outreach. They're kind of different beasts.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
So then, from our perspective as tournament organizers, we are trying to conflate the needs of the producers with their community outreach and marketing goals with the needs of the consumers as the players and what they are looking for. And
And I think it goes back to what you said in the way that we are like middlemen for that.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's kind of exactly where we are. So anyway, I don't know if anybody has any questions about the tournament organizing process or how that kind of goes along or whatever. But that's,
You got questions about graphics? I got answers about graphics.
you got
Any
answers about
questions?
graphics and all that stuff.
Graphics?
But I think that kind of covers the kind of the main points of what I think it was important to get across, because you know we work hard, and I know like we have a really good core of players that works really hard too to, you know, do right by the game and play the game well and stuff like that. But it's always interesting in dealing with the variety of people in the communities, you know, from the most dedicated to the most vocal, which aren't always the same people. Kind of the range of responses and interactions that we can get, because they're definitely there's definitely things that are not taken into account of what the responsibilities of the TO is, not just to the community, but to the game developers and publishers, and to the sponsors. So we have a few questions. We have
a couple questions, yeah.
Dark Owl wants to know about elimination brackets and etc. Shannon Maruku wants to know if TOs across regions communicate and share ideas. So look, go ahead.
Oh yeah, I was gonna say, I think first of all the elimination things again applies to general tournament rules and has been kind of agreed upon overall. Like we use double elimination for DOA, but if you want to go ahead, because I'm fighting, if you want to go ahead and try to explain those different types of eliminations and
yeah, so basically like so single elimination versus double elimination. Single elimination is obviously just like you lose once you're out, and that's not really a thing that's used much, at least in the fighting game tournament. Primarily because the nature of these games is such that it's really possible. I'm sorry for the stream quality. It looks like it's struggling a little bit right now, and I can't exactly figure out why. But double elimination exists to take into account the fact that people should be allowed time to make adjustments, essentially. Sometimes you just face somebody that's completely unfamiliar to you, you've never played before, and honestly, even from a promotional standpoint, like we don't want, you know, if we're running Street Fighter, you know, we don't want PR Rog or Gamer B or somebody to be out because they had like one bad match. You know, we don't want CJ or Hajin Shinobi, yeah, or especially if it's off stream. You know, we don't want CJ, we don't want Hajin Shinobi, we don't want Crazy Steady to be out if they happen to have one bad match. So from a promotional standpoint, it's really important.
Or even miss out on that great comeback. Sorry.
Exactly.
I felt your frustration there. I apologize.
It's okay. Yeah, so it's better for narrative storytelling within the tournament, but it's also better just to make sure that like your best people get a real chance at getting to the end and not having like a fluke loss. The round robin is something that is not. So the DOA festival had single elimination because they had so many people their issue, and because it was like a one-time thing. You know, if they were gonna
That's the
do
Japanese standard.
that is Japanese standard. They do single elimination out there.
Japanese standard.
Really?
Yes.
Well, there we go. That answers that. Yes, that's why they did that. For us, man, that's crazy. The other thing too is the round robin. The round robin is something that's basically not useful with larger groups of people. It's something that if you have a smaller group is a way to go. It basically, you create kind of like a sequential circular match thing where it's basically saying like everybody gets to play everybody else. And that's kind of the way that goes. And then you can decide from there, you know, based on like record or however you want to do it. The Japanese tourneys are all single elimination. Good call, CJ. The round robin, like I said, is just something that's not as useful for larger things. To get to Shin Maruku's question about do TOs across regions communicate? Yes and no. There's it kind of depends on the people. We have the benefit of knowing some of the other people and having the ability to communicate in some aspects with some of the people that we've had interactions with. It's not like there's necessarily like a TO forum or something like that for all games across all disciplines in all areas of the country or even internationally. That's not necessarily the case. It operates just kind of a lot more like any other network does. And so, you know, there are instances in which it's really important to reach out to someone else and, you know, ask questions or provide help. I mean, one of the things we did is there were events running concurrent to ours on the 17th, and so, you know, we had dialogue with the other people who were running those events. You know, like Osimic was running his event down south and so on. In order to try to not step on each other with our streams, because, you know, it's important. It's really important for us to, since we're all trying to help the larger DOA community, to make sure we're not splitting the viewership as much as we have the ability not to. So if he's running something from, you know, this time to this time, we'd like to run our DOA in a time that doesn't overlap or conflict with that.
And in a selfish way, it's kind of also like wanting to own that space. As much as we want to own that space, we also want to make sure they own their space.
They own their space. I mean, it's like any other.
Yeah.
It's like a network trying to make sure that all your shows like hit the audiences at the right time.
Right.
Whereas, for example, like a Street Fighter tournament going on at the same time as a DOA tournament, there might be less communication there because you're kind of aiming at different audiences, which I think shouldn't be the case, right? Like, ideally, you want lead in and lead over in audiences anyway, but that's just not always how it works.
Yeah.
And then as far as ideas and sponsors and things like that, it's really interesting because the things that work for some tournaments don't work for others in that sense, and a lot of that goes back to what we were talking to earlier about numbers and being able to justify expenses to sponsors and publishers, etc. and whatnot. So, you know, like while Big E is running Summer Jam, you know, for example, that has a ton of games, or TFC or whatever, you know, NEC, when that's coming up, like NEC is going to be huge for DOA. It's the end of, you know, Battle Royale 2015 and whatnot. Like, he has access to sponsors and he has access to resources, having a bigger tournament that is at the end of the year and can be a finale for DOA, but also has, you know, hundreds of other people playing other games as a larger audience overall than we have being like a DOA focused tournament primarily. So even though we could communicate, and to some degree we have, about kind of like what we want to see for the community and whatnot, the things that work for him don't work for us, and vice versa always.
Yeah. Well, and I think, you know, you brought it up later here in the question, is the reason I asked is if there are a bunch of TOs because you can collectively come up with ideas and talk to sponsors. Again, that has to do a lot with your audience.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, sponsors are, I mean, if we were to create sort of a TO union, maybe things would be a little bit differently. But as it stands right now, the audience size that we can reach, for both, like Evan said earlier, how many people are watching and how many people are actually there, vary from tournament to tournament, and that's how sponsorship goes.
Yeah. So one of the things, there's a good question from the Dark Owl about what is, how does one host or make a tournament? What are the requirements to do it? It really depends on what you want to do, right? And kind of the scale at which. I mean, at bare minimum, I remember the first tournament I went to that Johnny organized was, Johnny and Max organized, was like in Max's backyard. And it was very simple. Like, they literally just said, okay, we're going to host a tournament. Johnny, very luckily, because Johnny does a lot of other media ventures, had a lot of equipment that was useful as far as cameras and microphones and a computer that could organize and run streams and whatnot. They had that equipment and able to run it the proper way and just invited a bunch of people over and we did a tournament, right? Yeah. So that's kind of the low end, and it could be anywhere. And if you want to go even lower than that, especially with nowadays with the PS4 and Xbox One having built-in broadcasting capability to Twitch or whatever, you can host things just by having people come to your house and doing what I'm doing right now, just talking on the mic over the stream, right? You could just say like, hey, right now we got Johnny over here playing Tina. We got Lovesick Hero over there playing Ayane. Here they go, and you could do that, right? And then they took it even a little step further in communicating with Team Ninja and getting some DLC codes and things like that to kind of give away on the stream. So that's kind of the bare minimum, is like, you could just run a tournament in your own place and just charge people like a bare minimum amount if you want to charge people. You want to if you want to have a pot. But as you go larger in scale, more and more things become more complicated, more time and money expensive, and we just require an overall larger amount of energy. I mean, running a production like on our scale required months of negotiation with UCLA to get the date that we wanted to get the room that was going to be suitable for us, to make sure we had people like their tech people and their equipment people to set it up the way we wanted it to get set up. And even then, it's tough because sometimes things don't work out exactly how you want. Because when you go to certain venues and they require you to use their equipment, it's a little harder to do test runs and things that you could do when it's 100% your equipment. So that's one, that's just finding the venue. Two is doing all this community outreach and engagement things to make sure you get people there, right? Three is using all that to, in order to get sponsors and try to promote that to other people, right? So on one hand, you're promoting yourself to the players, saying like, come to us, we're going to do a good event. On the other hand, you're promoting yourself and the players to the sponsors and saying, look, we're going to run a good event. You want to invest money or products and time or whatever into it, and we're gonna pay that back through exposure to your products, through talking about it, whatever, running your commercials and things. So a lot of it is just looking for and finding and building relationships with sponsors, as well as with the community. And then, to do something like Johnny runs a beautiful stream. So Johnny puts in like countless hours in building all the graphics of the stream and building the look. Like Johnny and I have several meetings where we're talking about, what's the look, what's the tone, what's the feel of how we want things to do. And a lot of it, we try to treat it like making, making a TV show. We do art design, we do, we plan the way we want to, kind of direct the show, the things that are important to us to go to at what times and whatnot. And some of those things are done on the fly, but a lot of those things I've discussed beforehand. The builds of the graphics, when we want to do giveaways, things like that. And then it goes into, like, a lot of money gets put into it, too. I mean, we had to pay for the belt, which is one of the things we love to provide. We had to pay for the trophies, which is, the things that we think the players deserve to have trophies, I mean, not only are we paying for the venue and for the labor for the people at the venue, but then we're also paying for like all of the meetings leading up to that as well, you know, paying for the step and repeat, paying to get things printed and to do promotional stuff, Johnny putting together really good trailers, and luckily we had people that could help us out with stuff like that as well, you know. It's like, it's a really big thing.
It gets bigger as you go, and I wouldn't worry too much about, you know, trying to dive into the biggest version of it. Like Evan said, when we started, it was like me, Max, and Maurice, aka Bloodburger, and we were just like, let's get some folks together. People were talking about, you know, how it really started. We met people at Wednesday Night Fights, and like that sort of grew into relationships where we talked to those guys, and then they wanted another place to, you know, continue to play. We thought, yeah, we can host a tournament, like a little one, you know, just like a get-together. It's kind of like you and a bunch of your friends getting together and playing. And that community grows little by little, and then, you know, what you add to it as you go gets a little bit bigger each time, until we got to the point where we are now. And we're not, even now, you know, looking at Kai Crush 2015, we're thinking about, in the future, we're thinking about making it bigger. Like, you just kind of go step by step.
Yeah, it's crazy because, like, you would think, it feels like the line of, like, size of event to cost of event is really linear, and it's not the case. It feels like it's a more exponential curve in that sense. Like, the bigger you go, it doesn't just increase on a straight line scale. It's not like, okay, we wanted to do a 20-person tournament, now we wanted to do a 40-person tournament, so it's going to cost, you know, if this costs 100, it costs 200 now. It feels more like it's in multiples. Where, like, doing a 20-person tournament versus a 40-person tournament versus a 60-person tournament doesn't just go up like, okay, well, this was 200 and now it's 400, now it's 600. It really is like, okay, well, this first one might only cost 300, the second one costs 1,500, the third one costs like 4,000. You know, it goes up at like much greater degrees, because especially when you're trying to get, you know, like premium venues and spaces, which are really important. I mean, if you look at like what EVO and SCR and you see like what the bigger majors are doing, like those are extremely expensive venues. And there's a point to which that can start to pay off when you are getting, you know, thousands of people showing up, and maybe they're breaking even or they're running a small profit and whatnot, and that's fine.
Yeah.
But in the on the way phase, like, that doesn't work without the major numbers. And it's kind of what we were going back to earlier, where you kind of have this weird situation where you want to provide a better experience to provide as an incentive for more people to show up, but you also need more people to show up to be able to provide funding for the better experience, you know? Otherwise, it's all just coming out of pocket.
Like that. Yeah. But, you know, I'd like to point out too, like, we went from pretty much like backyard tournaments to, you know, wanting to do something bigger, and I'm not even kidding when I said it kind of stems out of one idea, which was, let's have a tournament where the winner gets a belt.
Yeah.
And from there, it kind of exploded. It was like, you just kind of get to that point where, you know, if it's something that you want to do and you want to continue to do, it kind of just expands exponentially. You know, when you hear stories about how, like, Evo got started, or like how Valle got started, it was like a bunch of guys and his friends in the garage, and eventually it turned into this thing where somebody just decided that they wanted to find out who the best player was, and it just grew like that. So, you know, there's no like 0 to 60 sort of version of this. You just kind of get started in your own way.
Big shout out Dantramax for following. I appreciate it. I don't know, I think that kind of wraps it up. Johnny, do you have any final further later points?
No, I think
thank you, Maria Ozawa. We got a follower, Maria Ozawa, which I'm sure many of our people know that name, but I'm sure it's not that actual person. Thank you so much for following. Yeah, I think that wraps it up. So that'll wrap up our DOA Talk session. And I don't know if there's any last moment ideas, questions, or anything from anyone in the party chat. I'm gonna take that as a no. All right, thanks so much for listening.
Yeah.